like to welcome Professor Jianjun from Tsinghua University. He's an expert on district heating, energy planning, and I think a number of different areas. So one of the leading experts in China on district heating. And the reason why we know each other is because I've been doing a study on policy translation, policy learning, and policy translation between Denmark and China. And I interviewed Professor Jørgen last autumn. So I took the opportunity when he was here to meet and to conduct this seminar. And in characteristic, very impolite Danish fashion, I allow myself to start, and then I'll ask you to speak afterwards. I hope it's okay with you, but I thought this would be the logical sequence of the presentations. So I will talk a bit about my study and what I found out. So I've just finished an article on policy learning and translation in Sino Danish collaboration. I used that as a case study. And the reason why I do that is that this collaboration has been going on for a very, very long time. Actually, since the zeros, and some people would say even further back to 1987, when DANIDA, the Danish International Development Agency, established the small wind development project in Xinjiang. And actually this led to the establishment of one of the biggest wind turbine producers today, Goldwind. So Denmark has been very active in the renewable energy area in relation to China for many, many years. But this collaboration has become closer and closer. And what interests me is what is happening in this collaboration, why is it happening, and how can we understand the nature of policy learning and policy translation. And I've always been intrigued by the fact that wherever I work in China, there's been a great enthusiasm for learning. And of course, I mainly work with technology transfer, and here I moved into another arena, which is policy learning. But in many ways, very similar. So this publication is interesting because it comes out of Sino-Danish collaboration. So if we look at the publishers, you have them up there. At the center is the China National Renewable Energy Center, and you have the Energy Research Institute, which is under the National Energy Agency within the National Development and Reform Commission in China. So it's really one of the leading think tanks on energy in China. Then you have current financing organization, which is a British organization called Children's Investment Foundation. What does this have to do with children? Well, because this fund is thinking of the future of our children. So it's about climate change and how you mitigate the climate change challenge. And of course, renewable energy is the key to this. And this China Renewable Energy Outlook has become institutionalized as a major publication offering studies, scenario studies on which development path could China take in the future when it comes to its green energy transition. So, in a way, we are talking about China's energy dream when we look at studies like this that forecast different scenarios for the development of the energy system up till 2050. It's a very long-term horizon in the Chinese context, where normally it's very short-sighted.
5 to 10 years?
Yeah, about 5 to 10 years, but this is longer, and this concept has been sort of bought in China. So these studies have become more and more important, you could say, for policymakers to study and understand and see if they can pick policy recommendations from them. So before, or in 2070, which is the baseline here, you see you have an energy system with final energy consumption where you have electricity as one component here, you have fossil energy here with coal, oil and gas, then you have heat here, and this is your specialization, we'll talk about that, and then hydrogen is a very, very insignificant part here, and renewable energy, of course, which is the light green. So I don't want to go into details with this. This is a very complex study, but it's been produced in collaboration between Danish and Chinese experts. That's the main point. And if you look here, you can see that you can actually increase electricity based on renewable energy in the future. You can cut considerably on the use of dirty energy, fossil fuels, and heat will increase. Renewable energy will increase, and this is primary energy consumption, and hydrogen will increase. And I also use the word an energy revolution. That's because this is used by Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. So he's talking about an energy revolution, but basically covers what we call the energy transition. And so this has been the talk of the town in China for the last 10 years, you could say. But actually, the Danish and Chinese sides have been working on developing these concepts for much longer. So we should go back to the mid-zeros, where Denmark signed a project agreement with the relevant Chinese organization. I forgot what it was called at that time, but about wind energy development. So if we look further in this study, this is the primary energy supply. We can see that it will go down in the future. So China can actually reduce its energy use, although the economy continues growing. So there's a decoupling. Yeah. And I think this has been important to show how this decoupling will actually unfold over a long period of time. And this is the most optimistic scenario in this study. So it's below 2 degrees zero, which is the sort of the official limit for temperature increase in the international climate negotiations. Although now it's been reduced to 1.5 degrees. But the countries are not obliged to subscribe to the 1.5 degrees. But clearly here in this study, this scenario shows how China can actually contribute to keep the temperature below 1.5 degrees. And it will reduce energy, it will increase renewable energy. So a large part of this will come from renewable energy. So from wind, solar, hydro, bio, geothermal, and ocean energy. And of course, these are resources that is used as primary energy supplies within the energy system. So one of the things that has been the focus for this work has also been thinking of the energy system as a whole. And we just talked about it before. Normally, energy sectors are fragmented, they are split, they have their own interests, they are pursuing their own goals. Very difficult to make them work together. And I think we will come to that when we talk about heat. Afterwards. So it's about the fragmentation of the energy system and the bureaucratic system that is managing the energy system. But what was particularly interesting to me was that this organization, China National Renewable Energy Center, that was set up with Danish support in 2011, made a business plan. And actually, in this business plan, the model for doing these studies were described simply but clearly. Of course, it's very complex. So you work with technology catalogs that describe where will technologies develop in the future, what can be used, and what would be viable to use in the future. Then you do your scenario analysis. You have some technology roadmaps for different sectors or different sources of energy. You have scenarios for RE development, and all of this, for this you need a sophisticated database, and you need this information to be available for anybody working with this, and then you can make policy inputs into the national RE strategies. At that time, this was a small center. I was involved in developing this business plan as a consultant for Danida at the time. And at that time, the center did not have a status in China, but now it does. But the model was described at that time, and the partners have stuck to this model ever since. Of course, it's become more refined and developed and all of this, but the basic concepts are the same. And now moving away from RE only to RE as the base, the center this year will produce a China Energy Outlook, just like the International Energy Agency does for the global energy situation. And so over the years they've come to increasingly work together to see how can we integrate our analysis of these different sectors, make them, and how through our policy recommendations can we help the policymakers to make decisions that will actually optimize the use of our energy resources on the one hand, and on the other hand increase the share of renewable energy in our energy system. And what they have shown is that it can be done at a much higher speed than anybody thought 10 years ago. So it's only for the policymakers to say, oh, this sounds good, this is what we're going to do. I'm not sure it works that way, but this is what interests me. So how does this collaboration actually develop and provide policy inputs into the Chinese energy policy process? And one of the reasons why it's been possible is that China and Denmark has a very good relationship, so we have a comprehensive strategic partnership, and actually the collaboration in energy is the most well-developed or the best developed collaboration. There are many other collaborative activities, and basically this is about government-to-government collaboration. So it's through national agencies within different sectors that work with each other to solve different issues or to investigate or whatever they do. It's different from sector to sector. This partnership was signed in 2008 and was renewed in 2017. I think it's coming out for renewal again in 20, isn't it? Yeah. But let's be frank, maybe the most successful part of this has been collaboration in the energy sector. So the partners are the Danish Energy Agency that has become a key partner for the Chinese Energy Agency. And we have a representative here from the Danish Energy Agency. This has happened over time. This was not the idea originally, but it's happened over time. And I think the Danish Energy saw an opportunity for actually engaging itself in global development also through this particular project. I'll come back to that later. There are a number of partners in China. The main partner is the National Energy Agency under the National Development Reform Commission, but there are many other Chinese partners, like you, for example, from Tsinghua University. So a lot of people are coming together, a lot of organizations to work on common projects. And you have the Energy Research Institute and China National Renewable Energy Center under it, which was where it all started, you could say. And this is a visit by the Chinese Energy Administrator in 2017. He was received by the Danish Minister of Energy and Climate, and he said that they know that the green transition in Denmark is no fairy tale. So the reason why China has been so interested in collaborating with Denmark is that Denmark at a very early stage started this green transition. So Denmark is one of the countries in the world that has the most experience in this field and has been most successful. And maybe we could also speculate Denmark is a small country, a small state, and we don't have a grand political agenda that we want to sort of pursue at the same time. So this is really about collaboration in the field. Well, unfortunately, he was taken for corruption a couple of years ago. His name is Noor Bekri. There's a new one now. But it didn't harm the collaboration, you could say. So all these energy administrators that have been there since the mid-zeros have actually taken a very active interest in this collaboration, and often they push the collaboration. So what I'm interested in is to study China's energy transition politics and how Chinese policy actors learn and translate policies from abroad. So I focus on what you call wicked problems, problems that are difficult to solve because maybe you don't know the solutions, often because there are complex stakeholder interests involved in them. And then it's a question of policy learning from the Chinese side is clearly driven by Chinese demand. Policy translation, how are these policies translated into the Chinese context and the local reality? Indigenization, how does this stimulate policy innovation in new policy designs? and then policy testing. And this is also what you were talking about, the latter part of this value chain, you could call it, which is looking at policies that will address some of the issues that we have logistically in China. So what is a policy? Well, it's the shared understanding of a problem of what is to be done in response to it, how, by whom, and to what effect. So it's like a collective script, you could say, for a certain arena, a certain action field. So when we talk about policy innovation driven by policy learning and policy change, it's about writing new collective scripts and policy designs to solve concrete challenges. And in this case, I inquire whether and why and how policies can be learned from abroad, translated into Chinese context, and become a new collective script. So this is what I wanted to examine. So if we look at policy learning and transfer, translation, then the policies are often learned from states that are perceived to be pioneers, as front runners, and this is certainly the case with Denmark, that China has been worried that it would be left behind. And therefore it's interested in learning from those who have the best experiences. So I think in that sense China is a good example of a country that chooses the path of policy learning and policy translation. But policies cannot be transferred, they are not universally applicable. And so they have to be translated into the local context. And eventually through this process they become indigenized, and maybe the Danish side cannot recognize the Danish policy in the Chinese policy. But there has been a process. And this is important to understand. How does this process evolve? How does it unfold? And what are the key elements in it? Therefore, in this process, translation agencies really important. You need good policy translators. And this is my argument. I see that those who have engaged in this collaboration between Denmark and China have actually learned how to policy translate together. So it's not putting Danish policies on the table and telling the Chinese side now you can pick them up and do whatever you want. It's really common policy learning. And also co-producing policy inputs like we saw before for the Chinese policy process. So what I realized, have realized through the years, is that the Danish Energy Agency become a kind of, I call it a preferred strategic policy interlocutor in China. There are others, like the Germans are very active in this field. The Americans have been very active now. I think there are some problems because of the trade war. But I once interviewed the American director of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the US that has been very active in China for many years. But he said, you know, you guys from Denmark, you have so much better access than we have. So I think that's an interesting statement. So the Danish Energy Agency has helped propose and co-produce policy inputs that could tackle these connected wicked problems in China's green transition. So I've read a lot of Chinese energy policy documents, and I identified what I call the commanding moments. So what are the moments that are where these wicked problems are articulated in such a way that they demand action? So I defined these combined energy and economic transitions, which means that China has recognized a long time ago that the energy system has to go through a green transition. But the key challenge for the Chinese policymakers is to ensure that it doesn't harm economic growth. So how can you have green economic growth? So that's one challenge. Very clear in the documents, and very clear from the interviews I made. Long-term comprehensive strategic energy planning, this has been one of the key points of the Danish Energy Agency to actually try to convince their Chinese counterparts that this was critical for making policy decisions, that you can look way into the future. You need to know what are the alternatives, what do they cost us, and this is what has happened with these scenario studies. And that has been accepted. China is planning longer and longer ahead, you could say. Grid integration of renewable energy has been a big issue in China ever since the wind energy development program started in the mid-zeros. And it's still an issue, and you will talk about that with district heating. Energy efficiency and district heating, district heating comes under energy efficiency, but of course it's also about integration of renewable energy. So to save on energy, reduce use of fossils and increase use of renewable energy in the district heating system. But maybe more importantly, to make district heating planning part of the overall energy planning. So I think that has also been a consistent point from the Danish Energy Agency, and which has been accepted by their counterparts in China. But from there to policy, of course, there's a long time, or a long way. Power sector and power market reform has also been a consistent message from the Danish side. You need to reform the institutional infrastructure of the energy sector. You need to use the market as a driving force. And actually, this has been promoted by this document number 9 from 2015 from the central leadership in China. So China is on the path of some kind of power market reform. I think anybody working in this sector knows how difficult it is, but it's about pricing and how you fix the prices and who are the actors and all of this. Technological upgrading, it doesn't seem to be a big challenge anymore. The technologies are there, so the question is how to apply them. But in the Danish-Chinese collaboration, we see the focus on the technology catalogs in the scenario studies. Not so much on technology transfer maybe, but on the use of our knowledge about technologies. And then the market principles. Actually, we counted in the documents I've been looking at the word market 864 times. It was used many more times than any other key concept. So market thinking is on its way into the sector. So my argument in the article is that Denmark has engaged with these commanding moments in different ways through a number of agreements. I can't go through them. But all of these agreements actually address some or several of these commanding moments at different points in time. And if you go down here, you have some of the recent ones, offshore wind energy, and you also have district heating. Here, from 2017. You're working on that program, so we'll hear more about that. So the collaboration has picked up these commanding moments, not because of the Danish energy system, but because the Chinese side has demanded it. Or the Danish energy agency, so I think one of my conclusions is that the Chinese side and the Danish side have agreed on two very, very basic ideological reflections that are behind the Chinese reforms. Whether they have come from Denmark or they come from somewhere else, it's a different story, but it's been consistent in the collaboration. So one is that you move from renewable energy as an add-on to renewable energy as the base of the energy system. So this is one transformation that has happened in Chinese energy policies, and the other is the market-based thinking. This was not there in the zeros. It's only come in between after maybe 2013-14. So you see it in the 13th five-year plan. It talks about building a modern, clean, low-carbon, safe and efficient energy system that can also safeguard China's energy security. And of course, this is a key concern in China, the energy security. On the other hand, renewable energy can help reduce the need for import of fossil fuels. So that's the other side of the story. So the partner's functional approaches to policy translation. So I'm looking at also the practical side. What do they do? Well, the focus, as I said, on learning from Denmark and from Danish experiences and from Danish policy mechanisms especially. And the Chinese side is demanding the best Danish expertise. So of course they get expertise from the Danish Energy Agency, but the Danish Energy Agency can also draw on expertise from any energy organization in Denmark, really, depending on what is the issue that the Chinese side wants to learn about. There's been a strong focus from the Danish side on building partnerships between the experts. And the Danish side works with second-tier Chinese policy actors with influence on policies. So the point is that it's difficult to get access to a Chinese policymaker, a top leader, you could say. And of course there is one top leader who is responsible for the energy sector, but you can't get access. It's not like in Denmark we have a reasonably flat structure. China hierarchical, but also this person has a lot to do, a lot on his plate. So actually, and maybe this is where the Danish side has had most difficulty in understanding how does the Chinese policy process work, is that when you work with these second-tier experts, they are real experts, and they have a lot of influence on policies. So the policymakers listen to them, like Professor Jørgen on district heating, has a standing and authority in speaking about district heating. So when you work with people in that layer who are very close to the central policymakers and who participate in lots of different activities, once in a while engage central policymakers, then you also get influence. So framing has been important, and framing the Danish experiences. And of course the Danish side can frame, the Chinese side can frame, or they can do it together. So I mentioned some examples of effective frames, frames that have been helpful in addressing some of these commanding moments and also lead to policy change. So one is called grid-friendly wind. So wind is something that can actually be integrated into the power grid. It's friendly to the power grid. You just need the right mechanisms and the right infrastructure. Chinese frame like the energy revolution, eco-civilization are really important. So if the Danish side doesn't understand that you have to talk to these frames, then you can't get anywhere in Chinese policy making. It's common reference material, you could say. I mentioned from RE to as an add-on to RE, an RE-based system. Also that has become a very important framing. Flexible power plants, renewable energy storage, flexible power system in support of the power sector reforms have also been important frames. Promotion of the market frame. So you use the market, and often people use the market without knowing what they're talking about. But in the collaboration, there is a focus on learning what did Denmark do in order to stimulate market development in a certain area. I've also been in workshops in China where Danish experts have been introducing Danish market principles and mechanisms, and there's a lot of attention, a lot of interest in learning the details of how this system works. And then demonstration projects, I think, is probably the most comprehensive frame, and you're going to talk about a project in Tongchuan in Shanxi province on district heating. But this can become transformative in a way, if it is successful, for the understanding of how the district heating system is integrated, can be integrated with the energy system. So leave that to you. And Chinese actors also use Danish policy concepts that they pick up through this common learning, policy learning process, like de-risking in connection with offshore wind auctions, which is now one of the most recent agreements that the Danish side has entered into with the Chinese side. So they're working on some demonstration projects. So the functional approaches, I think, continue with studying together. I think this has been very important, and a lot of the Chinese experts that I interviewed have been very keen to go to Denmark to learn in practice. So this is one way of learning. There are many ways of studying together, but this has been very important. And expert writings, so you disseminate the knowledge you gain either jointly or on your own. Also quite prominent in this translation process. And development of institutional capacity, like with the China National Renewable Energy Center, has proven to be extremely important. So it's not a series of needle-like interventions, but actually you build some institutional capacity that can build further alliances to promote this green change. So if we look at the policy influence, some of the Danish experts I interviewed, they were very much in doubt how do we actually influence Chinese policies. And I think that what you have to recognize is that it's indirect, it's not direct. It's very difficult. Maybe a Danish minister can give some advice to a Chinese minister. Maybe he will listen, but he will not just take it, he will go and ask his experts afterwards. So there's no direct influence on Chinese energy policies. You cannot claim that. But I think you can see a lot of Danish marks on a number of key policies. So long-term scenario-based energy planning, integration of renewable energy into the power grid, power market reforms, flexible power plants and district heating. District heating as part of the energy system. Maybe it's too early to say that there has been an influence, but we'll hear more about that. And wind sector policies, and then of course the role of the market. So the policy actors on the two sides believe that they produce good public value. Public value is the value that is created by the public sector and that can normally not be created by the private sector, or maybe in collaboration with the private sector. But clearly in the energy sector, the state, the government, and the government's agencies are key players because it's such a highly regulated sector on the one hand, but one of the main concerns is the energy security. We need a stable energy supply, and this is what the state has to ensure. But we can also note that on a number of these commanding moments, the resistance is dwindling. Yes, maybe there are conflicting interests, but a number of the Chinese experts I talked to say, yes, we can register that people are either being forced to change their mind or they are gradually coming over because they are convinced by the good arguments. But we also must recognize that China is still negotiating the two-betweens between fossil fuels and renewable energy, and between state and market. So there's no final, green light to the energy dream in the future. It will still be a bumpy road. So this called for more collaboration to address wicked policy problems. So I think I have to jump this about public value because we don't have time. But or maybe I should just say on the public value on the Danish side, for the benefit of the Danish participants maybe, that through this collaboration, the Danish Energy Agency and of course the Danish government has realized, with the support of the parliament obviously, that this is a good way for Denmark to contribute to reducing CO2 emissions. So Denmark has expanded this program to cover, I think, 14 countries now?
15.
15 now. So this collaboration is growing almost by the day. So new countries are being brought in, and it's based on this collaboration in China. So this has been an example of how policy collaboration can actually be quite successful. Of course, other countries have other problems, other ways of working, but that's another story. So the logics of the Sino Danish collaboration, well, we have an international outlook on the Chinese side, and the Danish case is the best practice learning case. So it's been understood that the two sides can tackle climate change collaboratively. The comprehensive Sino-Danish strategic partnership paves the way for government-to-government collaboration. This is one of the secrets of this collaboration, that it's been possible. The Danish Energy Agency has become this preferred policy interlocutor of China's National Energy Agency. The collaboration is demand-driven. That is, it reflects actual needs in China. So it's not Denmark trying to present a package of solutions for China. And the collaboration is based on collaborative policy learning and policy translation and co-production of policy inputs. So I think I also have a conclusion, but it basically just synthesizes this. So I think I'll stop here because time issues, and I think we can have a discussion afterwards. But I think I'll leave the floor to you. Talk about district heating and the Tsinghua demonstration project.
Thank you. It's really a great pleasure to be here and to talk about these energy issues. So frankly speaking, actually, previously I'm more working with technical projects. So I give lectures to engineers because I'm also in the School of Architecture, so I also give some lectures to the architects. So this is the first time actually, or quite new for me to talking with the energy issues, with our policy experts and students. But actually I think it's necessary because right now you can see, I think Professor Delman already mentioned that in China we're facing on the energy revolution. So we're talking about demand side and the supply side revolution and also the technical innovation. And meanwhile, very important will be the policy innovation. Because currently, if you're looking on what's really happening in China, and a lot of the case studies show that the problem is not mainly related to the new technology or the technology innovation, but most of the barriers coming from the policy part. Because everything is new, and previously the structures of our policy and even the price issue, everything are not fit very well with the new situations about the new energy structures. Okay, so that's why I was thinking it's quite important that it's not just China and Denmark who are talking together, it's also within the different fields, the engineers who are experts, and we're talking with the policy and decision makers, and also the policy studies becomes extremely important. So today I'm going to start with my familiar parts, so I'm mainly focused on the technical and innovations, and also, as you said, most times we're preparing for some background information for the decision makers, and so sometimes we have some discussions trying to influence for its parts. So that's why today also I'm going to share you some information about what we did before and what we think, and I try to make it fast so that we have more time for discussing. Okay. So actually I was thinking there's many reasons. I think we're talking about China, we're looking for this sustainable energy futures. So one part I already mentioned is for the energy security, because with the economic development, there's more energy required for the current situation. Of course, we're still looking for decoupling for the economic development, increasing for the energy increasing purpose. But right now, we're still facing these, the safety issues. And meanwhile, we're talking about air quality issues. I think most of you already pay a visit to China, and you will find out in the winter time we have the smog issues that do influence for the people's normal, the living conditions. But right now, I have to say, for the past 2 years, we have much better conditions. So for the air quality issues, this is mainly due to our energy decisions. And meanwhile, since China already also the leading countries for the Paris agreement, we're looking for the global warming issues. So that's why I was thinking also how we could decarbonizations for our energy sales and looking on the reducing for the greenhouse gas emission part. So that's why we're also looking more the different solutions. So actually, we do learn quite a lot from the histories, about the energy structure and energy reforms with the different countries. So this part actually show the change. Sorry, okay. Yeah. Okay. Later, where? Yes. So this trend actually with the different countries, different area about the coal, the portions within the energy structures. Actually, we're finding out previously before the 1950s, most of the countries were using coal for its main sources for our energy. And we started from 1950s, saying, okay, due to the air quality issues, mainly air quality issues, so we started to transform the coal to the gas and oil based. And they're using more than 25 years actually to reach for the goal to switch all the coals to the gas and to the oil. Of course, due to the 1975, due to the oil crisis, so you can say the portion for the coal increased a little bit, but it becomes quite stable in the future. And after in the 1997, I was thinking, just started with talking about the Tokyo Protocol, so we're thinking about global warming, so that's why most of the countries in the world are going to switch the energy from the oil and the gas-based to the renewable energy, trying to decouple for our energies and trying to avoid for too much CO2 emission and the greenhouse gas emissions. So China right now actually, because we're still developing ourselves, so you can see the energy structure for us is still coal-based.
So actually right now from here, I remember 2 years ago, there's a big discussion inside of China. A lot of experts trying to talk about what could be for the next step when we're talking about energy reform. So there's one direction that we're just following the conventional way. You can see switch the coal to the oil or gas and then talking about for the renewable energy. So that is a common way. Previously, a lot of countries doing something like that. But actually, you can find out normally if you want to change the structures, most of the infrastructure is going to be changed, the new technologies, and also the policy parts. So you need time to do this from the coal to the gas. But frankly speaking, we don't have enough time to do all of that. So we are talking on what happened in the 2030 and 2050s. So that is where lack of time. So that's why we think we could learn from the different countries, so the periods that we take the shortcuts, so we go directly to coal-based to the renewable energy. So that is a common understanding. I think after previously a couple of years discussing, most of the people in China, we believe that's definitely the renewable energy-based energy structure going to be the future in China. So I fully agree with that, with the conclusions you draw. And also, if you look, energy security, energy safety issue, to find out the current situation over here, you can find China right now, we have 20% of energy which are from the import from outside. Okay. So mainly the coal, mainly the oil and the gas. So 90% is coming from the seaside, from the sea over here. And you can see 71% of the oil is imports and 43% of the gas is import. So what's happening if we just switch all the coals to the gas or the oil? You will find out actually that's going to cause some problems, not just only for China, for the security issues. We did some calculation previously. We just find out that if we switch the coal to the gas, nearly 60% of the gas on the market right now in China, in all over the world is going to be in China, import to China. So definitely that's going to be a disaster, not just only for China, but for all over the world. So that's why within this part we're talking about renewable energy. But of course, there's some difference situation for the energy structures. Even right now we're talking about. So this can be, it's quite difficult, that we just simply copy, some other countries' pure rules, or can you just go directly to China or to some other places. So always you have to looking back to say, okay, what is your own, the characteristics? So what do you have, and what is the difference? We're always looking at the difference first, and then also looking at the common sense together and trying to see that what we can do to. So here actually we're talking about, because China is a really big country, so we'll find out that actually when we're talking about renewable energy, we're also looking onto what we really have, what is the resource we already have with our hand, because this is the boundary conditions. The first step we're talking about is how we could reach for the renewable energy in the based energy structure. So over here, I just put, you can see here, the solar energy, hydro, and the biomass, which are happening, which are different colors, which are represented for the resources. So over here, of course, there's some slide picture about the wind power. You can see that in China, most of the renewable energy resources, especially for the solar and the hydro and even the wind power, are on the west side, west and north sides. Okay. Only difference is the biomass material, because in China the biomass material is mainly the straw coming from the agriculture. So here in the northern part and or in the middle part of China, we have really a lot of straws. So this is the biomass material. But the situation happening, as you can see, we draw a line over here. This is a very famous line, we call it the Hu Huanying line. I think I already mentioned to a lot of people for that. It's quite a famous person, which has steady policy and also a lot of different kind of things. We just find out the situation that 80% of the population in China were living on the east side. So we're not matching with the renewable resource demand supply side with our demand side, especially this distance is thousands of kilometers. So that's why actually right now you can see we're talking about the district heating. Most people believe that in China we're using more renewable energy for district heating. But of course, when we're talking about the heating, normally it's matching with the demand side. So the building, we need district heatings. And the renewable energy, they cannot go directly to the distributed heating because they're not, especially for the locations are not much quite good. So only 1% of the renewable energy right now within this area we're using for the heating. So this is situation. It's not like Denmark right now. You can see that it's likely it's fully occupied of the people and very evenly distributed. But in China, it's not so evenly distributed. So that is also the rate in China. We're still thinking about using renewable energy. But due to we need this long distance distribution problem, that most of our renewable energy we transfer to the electricity. Because this is the cheapest way to transform the renewable energy to the place where we really need it. So that's why if you're looking on the current situation, you can find out a lot of different types of renewable energy transport to electricity, like the wind powers and solar panels, the PV, and also the hydro energy. You can see that's increasing really very fast for the past decades. So, for example, you can see we're already in the 2012, we're already the ranking #1 for the installed capacity for the wind power and the solar power in the 2015, and the hydro in the 2001 as well already. And also we're talking about the nuclear power plants. Because we did really very careful calculation about what we really have on our hands about renewable energy resources. Unfortunately, I have to say that it cannot 100% fully cover for all the energy we really needed. Okay, so most of the energy I was thinking is due to the situation. It's not just the building, like the heating we need, it's how the people need it. Most of the time, because China, we're still the industrial countries. So 60% of the energy we go for the industry sectors. And that's the reason also it's this product is not only for China, it's for all over the world, but producing in China. So they need the energy. So that's why, unfortunately, we don't have enough renewable energy covering for all this energy demand side. So actually, so you can see within the 2050s, so we still have 30% of the fossil energy, mainly coal-based, trying to within our energy structures. And all these coals will go for the electricity field, which means the power plants, or go directly to the industry sector for the producing. So that is the situation, that's what we find in China. But still, it's not enough. Because we're trying to, according to the Paris Protocol, so we have targets on how much CO2 emission could be reached. So more than 30% of the portion of the coal go to the energy structure already. If we exceed for this percentage, that's already the CO2 emission is too much. So that's why we need some other energy which don't produce the CO2, that is the nuclear. In China right now, we only have 2% of the nuclear powers go inside our energy structures. So much lower than the average value. So within that part, we think in the future we're going to do 8%, which exactly right now is the average value for all over the world. So not too much, just 8%. So from 2% to 8%. So that is what we think. Also, if you look all over here, we find out for the electricity, that's already 30% of the electricity in China is renewable energy. Mainly hydro, 20%, another 10% is wind power and the solar. They're going to be increasing in the future. I think until the end, we'll go to 60 to 70%. But still, we're talking about renewable energy. We find out that most of you know it's really not so reliable. They're according to the climate conditions. And if you have the sunshine, you can get a lot of solar energy. If you have the strong wind, you can get the wind powers, but they're changing all the times. So how we could, balance, make it stable and easier for matching with the demand side. Actually, that's already a lot of different kind of the technical approaches. One way you always need to think about storage. Okay, but still storage is quite expensive. And right now, it's not so economically acceptable. And also another way is that we could using this fossil power plants as a regulator to help us to receive more renewable energy. So that's why actually I just noticed that there's already some cooperation about how we have some flexible power plants to help us to receive more renewable energy in the future. So that is also one topic actually within our cooperation frame. Another thing actually I would like to mention, because this is a wind power over here. And this is coal-fired power plant current stage in China. You can find out actually the locations are really quite matching with each other. The good condition part is that during the summertime, all this coal-fired power plants already becomes regulators for all these wind power plants. So all the energy, wind powers go to the grid very easily. But unfortunately, due to the winter time, because these power plants are also working for heating. When they produce the heating, because heating when sent to the buildings it's quite stable, need to be quite stable. So there are lack of the regulations, the people's shifting regulations anymore for current situations for the power plants. So which means that, and also at the same time, because they need to produce the heating, they're producing also a lot of electricity. And this electricity already fulfilled with the requirement what we need. So when the wind power came in, they don't have the place for that anymore. So that's why actually in the winter time we have a lot of this called wind power curtailments. In China, in winter times, 86% of the wind power curtailments have to do within that period. But I was thinking actually this is not a technical problem. Definitely we already have a lot of technical solutions who could help. Even for these power plants, they producing the heating at the same time, they can use it for the flexible power plant to the regulation to help us to receive more wind powers, renewable energy. But unfortunately, the barrier will be the policy. So the policy is that most of the power plants would like to produce more electricity because they want to sell this as great. This is their incomes. But when you do the flexible regulations, actually are producing less electricity because we are trying to receive more wind powers. Definitely that can influence for the economic parts. But of course, this if we could do some technical policy regulations, and we could ask him to increase the price for some, if you are base load power plants, will be price different, or if you are using the peak load regulator, the price could be different. But still, this needs to be done within the current situation. And also, a lot of things you can see that in China, all this area that belong to the different province. Okay, so each different province have their own considerations about how to develop their economics. And most of times, this power plants is one of the quite important, the tax incomes for most of the province. So within that part, most of the times they prefer to use in their own producing the energy first. And if you don't have enough, then asking for some import from a different province. So within that part, I was thinking this because previously we have our old structures of our energy, and also the policy is fitting with that situations. But in the future, we're talking about renewable energy based. They're not matching very well, and this becomes a barrier for us to engage for more renewable energy based energy structures. And also, actually, I was saying that if you're looking on the heating parts, I would say that in China, previously we're talking about district heating. Most of the times it's not market-driven choice. So especially if we find out actually in China, only the northern part we have the district heating. And this is because previously, if you're looking on 30 years ago in the 1980s, or even early of the 1990s, most of the people actually in China, we don't have our own house or own apartments. So most of the apartments actually were rented from the company which are working on. So most of them are state-owned. So that's why actually the heating is some kind of the public service. So it's not the product, it's put on the market, it's public service. So most of the time they pay for free. So that is the situation. And right now, this advantage part is that the district heating is developing really very fast. We have, in the northern parts, most of the cities, we have more than 80% of the city, they are connecting with the district heating network. So that is the advantage part for us to do that. Okay. So this makes us more actually to developing our district systems. Okay. But the situation still over here, you can find out if you look on the energy structures, very heavily relies to this fossil, especially the coal. So this is the situation we find out still we have 33% of the energy heating are coming from the coal-fired boilers. It's not CHP over here, because CHP we believe it's already quite energy efficient, but the coal-fired 33% actually is too much. So that's why actually we're looking on the technical approach, is trying to see how to solve this problem, so how to replace this 33, at least this 33% of the coal-fired boilers in the future. But actually, there's another technical or not technical or policy issues influence behind it, because coal is always the cheapest one, the energy in China. So if you're looking on that, so if we go to the market driving procedure, we'll find out renewable energy can never beat the coal-fired boilers because they are always the cheapest one. So definitely this is part we think about. So there should have some policy innovations or policy reforms within this kind of situation. So how we could change these parts, especially for the pricing issues. Because previously, if you're looking on that, we never take the environment impact with our pricing issues. But actually, why we don't want to use the coal? Because coal, they're producing the flow, the flow gases, and also they're producing too much of the CO2. But within that part, we're not taking into account previously we consider about our pricing issues. So that's why within this part, definitely is very important in the future we think about this. So also the part we learned quite a lot from our Danish, the experience that you're putting the tax on this carbon emissions for the different kind of energies. So that could be happening in the future, and even right now we're thinking about this for this to do. But also we're looking on this roadmap for the China for district heating. You'll find out the technical approaches are quite different, frankly speaking, compared with Danish situation. For example, we're talking about the surplus heat applications mainly. And also we're talking about long distance distribution due to the large distance, low return water temperature systems. This is quite a match with our fourth generation district heating systems over here. And also we're talking about also these integrations with different kind of energy systems, thermal, heating, electricity, and the gas. So within that part, so due to time, I think I cannot go too much in details. Actually, we will find out actually the energy resources right now we're talking about for heating is not always renewable based. So renewable energy actually over here you can find out. So we did a really very detailed investigations for all over China in the northern part for more than 200 regions. Regions we're talking about what we really have. So you can find out only here this is renewable I have. But the surplus heat from the industry and the surplus heat of the power plants playing a very important roles. So that's why actually in the big cities we'll find out that the energy structure for this heating are quite different, not what's happening here in the Danish systems. But I was thinking actually this is quite match with the situation what's happening in China. And also we're talking about these integrations because the heating and the power and also the gas. Right now you can see that already some city power plants working for heating influence for our wind power curtailments. So actually we also could use as a very good, the technical approach to help us to receive more renewable energy within our grid, within the wind power. But anyway, there's still a lot of a barrier with the policy parts. So it's not technical. For technical part, that's already a very good solution, the roadmap to help us to solve all these problems. But still, the policy, how to support it for this kind of integrated systems. And also for that, so we believe that in the future, the gas will play really less and less important roles in our energy structures. But actually, they're touching some people within the cake, within the markets, So still a lot of gas companies would like to sell more gas, even not only in China, but also outside of China. Okay. So that is also the situation we need to face on how we could involve in our policy structures and the policy relation of the pricing issues to help us to do it. So finally I go to this Tongchuan case. Okay, so, but I will relatively go fast with this part. So why Tongchuan? As we said, previously we're mainly talking about the big cities, but actually, in Denmark we don't have big cities. So we don't have a big city with a population 20 or 30 million people living with the one big city. Actually, frankly, we don't like it in China at all, but that is the situation. But still, if you look on here, Tongchuan is within this situation. It's exactly in the middle of China. It is a Shanxi province, here Tongchuan is over here, and they have a different kind of regions within the Tongchuan city. And they're covering with a really different kind of the structures, the economic structures and also the energy structures. Over here, this is a new areas, so new developing areas. And this is old cities because Tongchuan previously they used to be the coal mine cities. Because why they're here? Because they have the coal mines. But unfortunately, they have to shut down all the mines due to our energy structure reform. So this part we could do this part. And this part actually is mainly the rural areas. So a lot of biomass materials sitting over there. So we believe that if we choose in this city, actually we could have a different region, actually have a different characteristics, and most of them they could be comparable to our Danish cities, the sizing Danish cities. Here we just look on why we choose Tongchuan, because over here, if you look in most of the times where the corporations, a lot of the experts first focus on the big cities. But right now I was thinking maybe the big city is not the best choice. It's always the best choice. In China, we still have really a lot of county towns. Okay, so over here, we just do the county. We have more than 1,500 county towns with a population from 30,000 to 100,000 people, and some of them even more than 100 people. But you know that 100,000 people here in Europe is already a big city. It's already really a big city. And so we believe that in the future, actually, all these regions are going to be developed really very fast. If you take in northern part, you still have more than 600, and also a lot of even smaller towns, which are really matching with the city within what's happening over here. So we did a lot of classifications according to the energy structures and resources, and trying to do some, this grouping analysis. And over here, you will find out that actually we could do that. And industry-based or some kind of suburban combined and in terms of the tourism and also the marketing type. Actually, they're quite different to each other. But most of the times, if you look at the comparative, we find out they're matching quite good with most of the cities over here. So we're looking in the future, we're going to be developing these counties and the towns to what's really happening here in Denmark or in some other European countries. So that's why we choose in Tongchuan, because it's really a very good case study for us to fully matching with each other. Because I don't think it's a good idea we compare with Beijing and with Copenhagen. That make no sense to do that kind of comparing work. But with Tongchuan, with different regions, with small counties, we can find very similar case, very similar situation what's really happening here. So that's why this good experience, technical part and the policy part will really helps a lot within us. So and just stop here a little bit, and we believe that some recommendations within our energy structure reform, and we'll find out these policies, actually the reforms, and also they are really quite important in the future. Even right now, we're also putting them in the priority parts. We're talking about how we could influence for policy and also the plans. And meanwhile, also we're talking about the policy in the markets and also the pricing issues. But frankly speaking, I don't think in the future our energy systems are going to completely market-driven the situation. Still, the states, the models plays very important roles, because we believe that all this energy, gas, heating, electricity, there's still some kind of the public service. Okay, within the public service, definitely should be state managers or be more efficient and more fair, going to that. And most of the times, actually, if all of them go to the market driving forces, definitely could cause some problems. But still, within some parts, we can use in this market driving force to help us to catch for the improvement or for the energy efficiency. So for example, right now we're still doing some study trying to make this combined mode. Especially we think we are using the grids or using this piping network for our distributed heat system becomes state-owned. So still there's a public service, public goods, we should do that. But within the supply side, the power plants or the different kinds of renewable energy sources, they could be market driving. And even also for the customers, they could choose use market driving force. They can choose with the different kinds of energy resources they would like to use in the future. So definitely in the future, I believe that could be a combination for all these parts. Okay. So I just stop here because I think there could be a lot of questions and very interesting things we'll have to discuss together. Thank you.